It started with screaming. Not the normal kind you'd expect inside Rikers Island. This was the kind that made even the toughest men go silent. An inmate named Devin Harris was pounding his fists against the steel door, his knuckles split and bleeding. His voice cracked as he yelled for help, but no one came. The guards just stood outside, staring through the tiny window in the door, whispering to each other. For 2 days, Devin hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. And now he was hearing voices that told him the walls were closing in, that everyone was out to get him. The other inmates started banging on their doors too, yelling for the officers to open the cell. But the guards didn't move. Then suddenly silence. Devin stopped screaming. The banging stopped. Even the air felt still. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went completely out. In that pitch-black silence, someone whispered, "He's gone." No one knew what that meant. No one dared to ask. But that night, the night the walls screamed, was when Rikers Island proved what everyone already knew deep down. This place doesn't just hold inmates, it breaks them. But to understand how it got to this point, how a young man's mind snapped inside those walls, we have to go back to the beginning. When 21-year-old Devin Harris was arrested for a robbery he swore he didn't commit, he thought the worst part would be the trial. He was wrong. The bus ride to Rikers Island felt endless. Outside the window, the city faded away until all that was left was water, gray skies, and the bridge that led straight to the island. When the bus stopped, Devin felt the air change, thick, heavy, and tense. The guards shouted orders before the inmates even stepped off. Keep your eyes down. Don't talk. Don't make a scene. That was his welcome to Rikers. Inside, everything was noise, metal doors slamming, guards yelling, inmates laughing like they'd lost their minds. Devin kept his head low, clutching his small plastic bag of clothes. He was assigned to Dorm 5C, one of the worst blocks on the island. The moment he walked in, every eye turned to him. Some stared quietly. Others smirked. He didn't realize it yet, but he had just entered a place where weakness was blood in the water. That night, Devin barely slept. Around 3 a.m., shouting broke out at the far end of the dorm. 2 inmates were fighting, fast and wild, using sharpened toothbrushes as blades. The guards rushed in, spraying pepper spray so thick the air turned white. Devin couldn't breathe. He pressed himself against the wall, coughing, eyes burning. He'd only been inside 6 hours, and he already wanted out. Days passed, then weeks. Devin learned fast that Rikers had its own rules. Don't stare too long. Don't refuse a favor. And whatever you do, don't show fear. The older inmates called it jail eyes. That dead, blank stare people get when they realize nobody's coming to help them. Devin started to get that look too. He saw people break every single day. Some cried quietly at night. Others fought just to feel alive. And some just stopped talking. The guards? Most didn't care. Some were scared. Some were cruel. But all of them were tired. Devin's bunkmate, a man named Marcus Lee, whispered one night, "Rikers don't just lock you up, bro, it changes you. Breaks you down, piece by piece." Devin didn't believe him. At least not yet. One morning, Devin woke up to find his locker open. His food was gone. His shoes were missing. That was a test. In Rikers, if someone steals from you and you don't fight back, you become a target. He asked around and found out it was Rico, a tall, muscular inmate who basically ran the dorm. Devin walked up to him, trying to sound calm. "Yo, man, I just need my stuff back." Rico laughed. "Your stuff? Ain't nothing in here yours, little man." Then he pushed Devin hard, sending him to the floor. The dorm went quiet. Everyone was watching. Devin had 2 choices, stay down or fight. And in that moment, fear gave way to anger. He stood up and swung. The fight was fast and brutal. Punches, blood, chaos. Then the guards stormed in, tackling both men to the ground. When it was over, Devin was cuffed and dragged down the hall. He was being sent to the Bing, solitary confinement. Solitary was a 6-by-9-foot cell, a metal bed, a toilet. That's it. The lights stayed on day and night. There was no clock, no window, no sound except his own breathing. At first, Devin tried to count the hours, then the days. But soon, time stopped making sense. He started hearing things, whispers, footsteps, voices calling his name. He yelled for a guard, but no one answered. He began talking to himself, just to hear something human. And slowly, piece by piece, his mind started to crack. Marcus's words came back to him in the dark. Rikers don't just hold you, it breaks you. He finally understood what that meant. Because now, Devin wasn't just locked up. He was lost inside himself. And that's when the screaming started. The cell was silent. Too silent. Devin sat on the edge of the metal bed, staring at the wall like it was breathing. His hands trembled, and his lips moved, but no words came out. He'd been in solitary for what felt like weeks, maybe months. He wasn't sure anymore. There was no clock, no sunlight, no sense of time. Only the sound of dripping water from a rusted pipe and his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Every few hours, a tray would slide through the slot in the door, cold food, untouched. Devin stopped eating. The smell alone made him sick. Sometimes he thought he heard his name being whispered from inside the vents. Other times, he saw shadows move in the corners, even when the light never turned off. He told himself it wasn't real. He told himself he was still okay. But the walls kept closing in. Then one night, he heard a voice. A clear, calm voice. "Devin," it said. He froze. "Who's there?" No answer. He pressed his ear against the door. The hallway was empty. But the voice came again, closer this time. "Devin, you don't belong here." He jumped back, breathing hard. He looked around the cell, heart racing. The room was the same. Empty. Cold. Still. Then he saw something scratched into the wall, words carved deep into the paint. It said, "They watch you." Devin stumbled backward, his chest tight. His head pounded like it was splitting open. He banged on the door, screaming for the guards. No one came. He screamed until his voice gave out. Then he slid to the floor, shaking, tears streaming down his face. That night, something inside him broke. The next morning, the guards opened the door. Devin squinted at the sudden light in the hallway. They pulled him out roughly. He didn't resist. He couldn't. He looked thin, pale, and lost. His eyes, wide, unfocused, told story of someone who wasn't all there anymore. "Back to 5C, one of the guards said. "He's done enough time in the box." They marched him down the corridor, past other cells filled with broken voices, people talking to themselves, laughing at nothing. When they threw him back into the dorm, everyone went quiet. Devin didn't speak. He just sat on his bunk, staring at his hands like they weren't his own. Marcus, his old bunkmate, looked at him and whispered, "Bro, you good?" Devin didn't answer. He just smiled, a slow, empty smile. Later that night, Marcus heard Devin talking again. Not to him. To the wall. He whispered things like, "I can't hear them, they're still here." Marcus tried to get his attention, but Devin didn't even blink. By morning, the other inmates started avoiding him. Even Rico, the guy who used to run the dorm, kept his distance. Nobody wanted to get too close to the man who had come back from a box different. Days passed. Devin barely spoke. But then, something changed. One night during count time, a guard named Officer Klein walked by and tapped on Devin's door. "You all right in there?" he asked. Devin turned slowly, eyes hollow. "Do you hear them too?" he whispered. Klein frowned. "Hear who?" Devin pointed to the wall. They never stopped talking. Klein shook his head. "Man, you need to get some sleep." Then he walked off. Devin just kept staring. He could hear footsteps in the walls, whispers in the vents, laughter behind the ceiling. And then he saw it. A shadow, standing right by the door. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. It was just there. Devin's heart dropped. He blinked, and it was gone. He grabbed his blanket, wrapping it tight around himself. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Stop it, please, stop it." But the whispers only grew louder. By morning, Devin hadn't slept a second. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was pale. Marcus tried talking to him again, but Devin just stared into space, mumbling to himself. And that's when it happened. During breakfast, Devin suddenly stood up and flipped his tray. Food splattered across the floor. He started shouting, wild, uncontrollable, screaming that the walls were watching him. Guards rushed in, tackling him to the ground. He fought like an animal, kicking and biting, his voice cracking from the yelling. Inmates watched as Devin was dragged out of the dorm, thrashing, crying, his voice echoing through the hallway. And once again he disappeared. Back to the place that started it all. Back to the box. That day, the dorm went quiet again. Even Rico didn't joke. Marcus sat on his bunk, shaking his head. He whispered to himself, "Rikers don't just break you, it keeps breaking you again and again." And he was right. Because somewhere deep inside that building, inside that cold, concrete box, Devin Harris was losing his last piece of sanity. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed like thunder inside Devin's head. He was back in the box. Back where the silence wasn't really silent, where the air itself seemed to hum with whispers. Only this time, something was different. The walls were colder, the lights were dimmer, and somewhere, deep in the shadows, something was whispering his name. Devin. He pressed his back against the wall, shaking. He tried to cover his ears, but the whisper was inside his head now. It wasn't just noise, it was memory. Every word he'd said, every scream, every moment of pain was playing back like a broken recording. He could hear Marcus's voice, Rico's laughter, the guard shouting. And then, silence again. Devin whispered, "You're not real. You're not real." But the voice answered back, "Neither are you." He froze. He looked at the door, at the small window, and for a second he saw his reflection staring back. But it wasn't him. The reflection smiled. Devin jumped back, breathing hard. He pressed himself into the corner, tears running down his face. He screamed for help. He begged for someone to open the door. But nobody came. Just the same echo, bouncing through the metal, repeating his own screams right back at him. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time didn't move in Rikers Solitary. It just stretched. Devin started scratching the walls, carving words like help, and I'm still here. He wasn't even sure why. Maybe he wanted someone, anyone, to know he hadn't disappeared completely. But deep down, he was starting to believe no one would ever see him again. That's when something new happened. A low, steady sound began coming through the vent. Not a whisper this time, a voice. "Can you hear me?" it said. Devin froze. "Who is that?" The voice paused. Then, "You're not alone, man. They did this to me too." Devin rushed to the vent, pressing his ear against it. "Who are you?" The voice came again, slow, calm, tired. "They call me Red. I've been in here. I don't even know how long." Devin swallowed hard. "They put me back. Said I lost it." Red chuckled weakly. "We all lose it in here. That's the point." For the first time in weeks, Devin felt something, relief. Someone else was alive in this nightmare. They talked for hours. About the outside world. About the noise of New York. About freedom. But when Devin asked what Red was in for, the voice went quiet. Then Red said something strange. "Don't let them break your mind, Devin. Once they do, they keep you here forever." Devin frowned. "What do you mean, forever?" But before Red could answer, the vent went silent. Devin called out again and again, but there was nothing. Just the hum of the light above him. He pressed his face to the vent, whispering, "Red, you there?" Still nothing. Then tapping. From the other side. 3 slow taps. Then 2 more. Devin smiled weakly. It was their code now, a sign that Red was still there. But later that night, something didn't feel right. The light started flickering again. The air felt colder. And from the vent came whispering. Not Red. Someone else. Dozens of voices, overlapping, hissing, laughing softly. Devin backed away, clutching his chest. They were whispering his name again. He shouted, "Stop it! Stop it!" The whispers grew louder. Then suddenly, bang. A loud slam hit the vent. Devin jumped back, heart racing. Then silence. He slowly stepped closer, his breath shaking. And right before his eyes, something slid through the vent slot. A small, folded piece of paper. Devin picked it up. His hands trembled as he opened it. It read, "There is no Red." Devin dropped the note, staring at it in disbelief. He felt at his knees, whispering, "No, he's real. I talked to him." But deep down, something inside him cracked again. Because he knew. He never once heard another door open in the hallway. No food trays sliding near Red's cell. No guard ever talking to him. Nothing. So who was he talking to? Hours later, when Officer Klein came by for rounds, Devin was sitting perfectly still on his bed, staring at the vent. The officer glanced in through the slot. "Harris, you good?" Devin slowly turned his head. His eyes were wide. He smiled faintly and said, "Red says hi." Klein frowned, confused. He looked at the vent, then back at Devin. The look in Devin's eyes sent chills down his spine. He closed the slot and walked away fast. But behind him, from inside the cell, the sound of tapping started again. 3 slow taps. Then 2 more. That night, for the first time in years, even the guards avoided the isolation block. Because from inside one of the cells, they could hear 2 voices whispering. One pleading, one laughing. And no one could tell which one was real. It started with a scream. Not Devin's this time, someone else's. It echoed down the corridor like thunder, cutting through the silence of the isolation block. Officer Klein shot up from his chair in the control room. "Who's in C block?" he barked into his radio. Static. No response. He grabbed his flashlight and walked toward the cells. The air was heavy, too still. Even for Rikers, something felt wrong. The first few cells were quiet. Inmates stared at him through the slots, eyes wide and terrified. Then he got to Devin's door. Klein hesitated. He could hear whispering, faint, fast, almost like 2 people talking over each other. But Devin was supposed to be alone. He took a step closer. "Harris." No answer. He looked through the slot. Devin was sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the wall. His lips were moving. His hands were twitching. "Hey, Harris." Devin stopped moving. Slowly, he turned his head toward the slot. His eyes looked darker, hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. And then he smiled. "He's here." Klein frowned. "Who?" Devin tilted his head. "You'll see." Then he started laughing. Slow, deep, like something inside him had snapped all the way through. Klein backed away. "Stay where you are." But before he could radio for backup, every light on the block flickered and went out. Pitch black. The sound of metal doors clanging echoed through the darkness. Then came the whispers again. Not 1 or 2, dozens. Maybe hundreds. It felt like the walls themselves were alive. Klein's flashlight flickered on for a split second, and what he saw made his heart stop. Devin was standing now, pressed against the window slot, his face inches from a glass. Blood dripped from his nose, his eyes wide open, staring straight into the beam of light. "You can't stop it," Devin whispered. "It's already inside." The flashlight went out. The emergency lights finally kicked in a few minutes later. But by then, the damage was done. Cell doors all across the isolation unit had somehow unlocked. Inmates were screaming, banging on the doors, some chanting, others crying. Klein stumbled back to the control room, shaking, and hit the lockdown switch. Nothing happened. The system was dead. He called for help again. "Control, this is C block. We have a situation." Static. Then a faint voice came through the radio. "They're not supposed to be out." Klein froze. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." But all he heard next was laughter. Meanwhile, inside his cell, Devin stood perfectly still. The red emergency lights flashed across his face. His breathing was calm now, too calm. The voices were louder than ever. They weren't whispers anymore. They were orders. "Open the door. Finish what we started." Devin reached for the door handle. To his surprise, it moved. He stepped out into the hallway, barefoot, his head tilting from side to side, as if listening to something only he could hear. Around him, other inmates were stepping out too, confused, dazed, whispering. Then, without warning, someone screamed. A guard had come running around the corner, baton in hand, shouting for everyone to get down. But no one moved. Devin looked at the guard, his face blank, and whispered, "You don't belong here." The guard froze, startled. "Back in your cell, now." Devin took one slow step forward, then another. The guard raised his baton, but before he could swing, 3 inmates lunged from behind him, tackling him to the ground. Chaos exploded. Sirens blared. Doors slammed. The hall filled with smoke from flashbangs as officers rushed in, shouting commands. Devin didn't move. He just stood there, watching the chaos unfold around him. For a moment, it felt like the entire prison had gone insane. Inmates screaming, guards fighting, red lights flashing like lightning. And through it all, Devin just smiled. Because somewhere deep in his head, the voice whispered again, "Now you see what they made us become." Hours later, when order was finally restored, dozens of inmates were injured. Several officers had been taken to the hospital. And Devin Harris was gone. His cell was empty. The door was wide open. But no one saw him leave. Security cameras? Dead. Footage? Wiped clean. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. That night, Officer Klein sat alone in the control room, staring at the monitors. Every cell was locked again, every door secure. But from somewhere deep in the isolation wing, the sound came back. 3 slow taps. Then 2 more. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. Klein's blood ran cold. He turned toward the hallway, whispering, "Devin." But no one answered. Only the echoes. The morning after the Rikers outbreak, the island was on full lockdown. Helicopters circled above the gray rooftops. Dozens of NYPD vans lined the bridge, lights flashing. Inside, investigators in black jackets moved through the hallways, cameras, notebooks, radios buzzing. The air smelled like smoke and bleach. Blood stains still marked the floors. But the strangest part wasn't the chaos. It was the silence. Almost every inmate they questioned said the same thing. They didn't remember how it started. They didn't remember why they fought. Some even claimed they heard voices. And then there was Devin Harris. His name was everywhere on the reports. The inmate who vanished from a lock cell. No one could explain it. Officer Klein sat in the warden's office, pale and shaking. His hands trembled as he clutched his statement. The warden leaned forward. "You're telling me he walked out?" "Through a sealed door." Klein nodded slowly. "I saw him, sir. He was standing there, talking to someone that wasn't there." The warden sighed, frustrated. "And you didn't stop him?" Klein's voice cracked. "Sir, I don't think I could have stopped him." Hours later, a small team was sent to check the security system. All the cameras in the isolation block had gone offline during the incident. But one backup drive, buried deep in the system, still had partial footage. When they played it back, the screen flickered with static. For a few seconds, they saw Devin in his cell, pacing, muttering to himself. Then he stopped. He looked straight into the camera, right into it, and whispered, "They're coming." Then, the feed cut to black. The technicians froze. One of them replayed it, thinking it was a glitch. But no, the moment was real. The warden leaned in, frowning. When was that recorded? The tech looked at the timestamp. His face went pale. About 2 hours after he disappeared. The room went silent. That night, the rumors spread fast through Rikers. Some inmates swore they still heard Devin's voice at night. Others said they saw him walking the hallway, just out of reach, whispering through the vents. A guard reported seeing someone in the control room after hours, a shadow moving fast, disappearing when the lights flickered. Every time someone went to check the cameras, static filled the screens. And always, after the static cleared, the same words would appear for just a second, scratched into the video feed itself. "I'm still here." Officer Klein couldn't sleep. He hadn't slept since that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Devin's face in the flashlight beam, that empty smile, that quiet whisper. "He's here." Klein tried to tell himself it wasn't real. Just trauma, stress. But the sounds in the hallway kept proving him wrong. The tapping. Always the same rhythm. 3 slow taps. Then 2 more. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. It happened at random times. Midnight, 3 a.m., dawn. Every time, it came from the same direction. The isolation wing. A week later, a maintenance crew was sent to repair the damaged ventilation system in the isolation unit. They started near Devin's old cell. One of the workers, a young guy named Luis, climbed up into the vent to inspect the wiring. "Yo," he called out. "Something's jammed in here." He reached in and pulled out a small piece of folded paper, covered in dust. When he opened it, his hands froze. Scrawled across the page, in shaky handwriting, were 5 words. He never left the walls. Luis jumped down from the vent, pale and shaking. "What's wrong?" one of the other workers asked. But before Luis could answer, a deep thud echoed through the hallway. Then another. Then another. Like someone knocking. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. Everyone froze. The sound came from inside the vents, moving slowly from one end of the hall to the other. By the next morning, half the isolation unit had been cleared out. Officers refused to work that section. Even the warden ordered it sealed for safety reasons. But the noise didn't stop. Every night, through the steel walls, through the concrete floors, the tapping continued. And sometimes, when the power flickered, inmates said they could hear a voice whispering through the static. "You can't fix what's broken." Weeks later, Officer Klein handed in his badge. He couldn't do it anymore. As he walked off the island for the last time, he stopped halfway across the bridge and looked back at the prison. Through the fog, he swore he could see a faint red light blinking in one of the isolation windows, flickering like a heartbeat. He stood there, staring. Then he heard it again, faint but clear. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. He turned around fast. No one was there. He whispered to himself, "You're gone, Devin. You're gone." But deep down, he didn't believe it. Because on Rikers Island, nobody really leaves. Not the broken ones. Not the lost ones. And maybe not even the dead ones. Days turned into weeks, and Rikers Island tried to move on. Officially, the report said the incident was caused by a malfunction in the security system. No mention of Devin Harris. No mention of missing footage. Just another problem quietly buried under paperwork. But the inmates hadn't forgotten. They whispered his name through the vents, carved it into the walls, and told new arrivals the same warning. Don't go near isolation after dark. The guards, too, had changed. They avoided the block, worked shorter shifts, and refused to patrol alone. Even the toughest ones, the kind who laughed at ghosts, couldn't shake the feeling that something inside Rikers was watching them. And maybe it was. One foggy night, a new officer named Ramirez was assigned to cover isolation. It was his first week on the job. No one told him about what happened there, just that he had to check the cameras every hour. By midnight, the hall was dead quiet. Only the buzz of the fluorescent lights broke the silence. Then came the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. He froze. The sound echoed down the hallway, slow and steady. "Hello," he called out, flashlight shaking in his hand. No response. He walked closer, shining his light on the cell doors. Every one of them was empty, just cold, bare walls. Until he reached cell 12. Devin's old cell. The light flickered. The air turned heavy. And then faintly, he heard a whisper. "They said I was broken." Ramirez's breath caught in his throat. He stumbled back, dropped the flashlight, and ran. When the backup officers arrived, they found the flashlight still rolling across the floor. But no sign of Ramirez. Only his radio, lying outside cell 12. It was still on, and through the static, one word came through over and over again. Help. By morning, Ramirez was listed as missing. The warden ordered the isolation wing permanently sealed. Concrete barriers. No access. No cameras. Officially, the report said he resigned. But those who worked that night knew the truth. The tapping never stopped. Even through the concrete. Even after they shut the power off. And sometimes, when the wind blew across the East River, you could still hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. Months later, Officer Klein sat alone in a small apartment in Queens. He'd been drinking again, trying to forget. But the memories always came back. He turned on the TV. The local news was running a headline. Rikers Island to be shut down by 2027. He stared at the screen, silent. A part of him felt relief. But another part, deep inside, felt fear. Because he knew what was buried in those walls. And if they tore Rikers down, where would it go? He leaned back, rubbing his face. The room was quiet, too quiet. Then, from somewhere behind him, came that familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap. He turned slowly toward the wall. And there, faintly scratched into the paint, were the same 5 words. He never left the walls. The screen faded to black. Rikers Island, a place built to punish, ended up breaking more than just inmates. It broke guards. It broke minds. It broke whatever line separates the living from the haunted. They say when a place absorbs too much pain, it remembers. And maybe that's what Rikers was. Not just a prison, but a living memory of everything that went wrong behind those walls. And now that it's closing, maybe the silence isn't peace. Maybe it's something waiting to be heard again.